The thanks are from us to you. Thank you very much indeed. Now I'm looking for a contributor from Wales. Yes, the young person there with the sort of pinkish jacket. Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name is Ushanka Rajapakse and I represent the Vale of Glamorgan. March 2017, 34,700 offences involving a knife or sharp instrument in England and Wales. Between 2003 and 2013, 18,220 people with mental health problems took their own life in the UK. Just like knife crime, mental illness takes away so many lives and affects so many families. Emotional ill health, in my opinion, is just as important as physical because it can take away as many lives. Statistics show there is a larger amount of people in Wales suffering with mental health compared to knife crime. The South Wales and Gwent police forces, which cover Wales' three biggest cities, recorded 742 serious crimes involving knives during the last financial year, whereas mental health problems affect 1 in 4 children. To put that into perspective, 75% of you would be struggling with a mental illness by the time you reach adulthood. One of the most shocking and saddening statistics I found was 1 in 10 people believe people with mental illness are less trustworthy than people without. I do not believe in this statistic at all because I don't believe that mental illness should be able to judge a person's morality. However, I do think it shows how much we need to improve the education system as there is still such a negative stigma around mental illness. I also feel this issue is so important because it unites not only young people but adults as well, as compared to some of the other issues we're facing, such as votes at 16 and equal pay for equal work. This could unite and build a bridge between us to the adults of the UK country. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. OK, thank you very much. What about Scotland? Let's hear from Scotland. Yes, you from Scotland. Yeah. Your moment has arrived. Your time is now. Your opportunity is here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Lucy Penman from Mid Scotland in Fife. MIPs, from the debate we have just heard, it's clear to me that the campaign for improving mental health for young people is needed now. Too long have we not paid enough attention to young people's mental health, one of the biggest issues facing our generation currently. Today in the UK, 75% of young people who have had a mental health problem are not receiving treatment, and 51% of our generation are embarrassed to talk about mental health. These statistics demonstrate that it is apparent that mental health services and the stigma surrounding this issue across the UK must be changed for the better. We cannot let our family, friends and colleagues continue on this journey with little or no support from ourselves, our education systems or the government. In Scotland last year, children and adolescent mental health services did not meet their target of seeing 90% of patients within 18 weeks. Again, this is another shocking statistic, and the fact that we, the representatives of the young people, allow this to happen is despicable, and we should be working toward making a positive change to mental health. So with this, I urge you to vote for this campaign and bring effective change to our curriculum and tear the phrase that had dominated every young person. Thank you.
Well, I hope you're proud, because you should be very proud indeed. What about the southeast of England? Who have we got from the southeast of England? A woman who's just leapt to her feet with alacrity. I thought you were going to fly like a rocket into the air. Your good self. Yeah.
Very much. In the UK, we are all very privileged to live in this representative democracy. In my hands, I hold the book of Mary Wollstonecraft, A Vindication of the Rights of Women. As the Youth MP for Milton Keynes North, sorry, my name's Rachel Grammy-James, I want to express some quotes from my constituents. There is not enough awareness or help for young people, not enough support for young people in schools. People with mental health issues are treated as if it's a choice, or they are told just to pull themselves together. I urge my fellow members of the UK Youth Parliament to represent the people who they are meant to represent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. Now, what about Yorkshire and Humberside? Yeah, the first person I saw leap to his feet is the gentleman there. Yes, indeed, sir.
Mr. Speaker, my name's Ben Miller and I'm the Member of Youth Parliament for Calderdale. Mr. Speaker, we've heard it all before. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. But think about it this way. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean that we can ignore and completely overlook this crucial topic that affects countless young people all over the UK. Just think about that for a moment. Thank you.
What about the northwest of England? The northwest of England. What about the young man there with the burgundy claret wine-coloured shirt? Call it. No, you're looking round befuddled, sir. No reason to be befuddled. It is you. Your chance is... Let's hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. William Powell, and I represent the passionate young people of Wigan and Lee. 1 in 4 people in the UK will be affected by a mental health condition in their lifetime. Do you realise that that means almost every single household has some sort of connection with a mental illness? Mental health issues present a rising tide. They do not discriminate by age, gender or ethnicity, and present a continuum of challenge from anxiety and depression to serious breakdown and suicidal tendencies. Mental illness can be a battle. I'm sure no one can deny that. I'm sure we all know people who suffer from some form of mental health illness. And I know from my experience that many of these people are brave, because there is nothing worse than waking up and fighting a war inside your head. Despite a much wider public acceptance and an acknowledgement of mental health issues, a lot of the time these issues are still being kept secret or not even discovered. And that's the most harrowing bit. Young people suffering in silence while the world changes around them, too many of whom feel isolated, unable to speak out. And it is our job to be that voice, as has been said, the voice of the voiceless. If we can help young people now, we can help them secure the best possible opportunity to succeed in later life. We must work together to stop stereotypical judgments, to stop stigma, and more importantly, we can help people get the support they need. We must lobby for more investment in child and adolescent mental health services and sustain awareness to an illness so close to each and every one of us. There are more people affected than we realise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, my friends, what about the southwest of England? The southwest of England. Let's take the young woman here in the penultimate row from the back. Your good self. Indy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name is Sophia Ashraf and I'm the MYP for South Hants and Cambridge. In 2016 to 2017, the funding of NHS mental health trusts in England rose by less than 2.5%, far less than any other physical health areas. This has forced approximately 20,000 people below the age of 18 to attend A&E so that they can access some form of mental health treatment. Recent figures have suggested that 10% of children in the UK aged 5 to 16 have some form of mental illness, with the average wait to be treated being 10 years. These statistics cannot be ignored. Improving mental health services should, unquestionably, be our campaign in 2019.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, what about a speaker from London? Yeah, OK, from London, I think... Take the young person there. Yeah, indeed, yourself. Thank you.
Every person in this room will know at least...
Hold on, sorry. What is your name and from where in London do you come?
Emily Warnham and Bromley.
Emily Warnham from Bromley.
Every person in this room will know at least one person who has been affected by mental health issues. and has probably been failed by mental health services. With more pressures than ever before on young people, with exam pressures and social media, mental health is becoming an even greater issue. But this rise in mental health problems has come alongside a decrease in the support and funding for support services. Mental health issues affect every aspect of a young person's life, and campaigning on mental health would allow us to really make an impact to the very people that we represent. As a youth parliament, we could use this platform that we have been elected to hold and put pressure on our government, hold them to account, locally and nationally, to ensure that there is adequate funding to services. But further than that the services being provided are adequate. If we neglect this issue, we neglect our young people, we neglect our constituents, and we neglect our own peers and friends.
Thank you. Thank you, that's very powerful. Now, do we have a would-be speaker from the West Midlands? Who have we got from the West Midlands? Sir, again, I thought you were going to be a rocket. Please, let's hear from you.
Hello, I'm Morgan Stinchcombe, and I am from Warwickshire. I am here to argue against the motion for reasons which are very complex. I would argue that we are neglecting our young people if we do not argue for those who have assisted us so much. And I speak, of course, about educators. There is a mental health crisis, true, amongst young people, but also equally amongst educators. According to Leeds Beckett University, half of all educators in the United Kingdom have a diagnosable psychological condition linked to anxiety, stress, or depression. Some of these teachers come from backgrounds of poor mental health, and they have added stress due to the systematic dealings of our education system. I argue that just as 3/4 of these people who were interviewed said that their condition had a detrimental effect on students, I argue that if we do not, for once, pay attention to teachers' mental health, then we'll have a detrimental effect on students everywhere, including ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Now, we've got time in a moment for two very short contributions from the backbenches before we have the wind-up speech, but throughout the day I've referenced colleagues who've made the effort to be here, and I want to extend, and I know you will want to extend, a particularly warm welcome to someone who is not exactly short of things to do. You heard from the Prime Minister this morning, but I want to welcome, and I ask you to welcome this afternoon, somebody I've known throughout my 21 years in this House, whose constituency I visited, whom I've come to know very well, who's passionate about young people, who says what he means and means what he says, and that's what people say they always want in their politicians. Please welcome, with warmth and enthusiasm, the Leader of the Opposition, Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy, thanks. Typical of you for making the effort to be here and to show your support for the Parliament. It is hugely appreciated. Now, we have time, well, I don't know whether we do have time, but I'm going to make time for a very brief contribution for a representative from the east of England. Who have we got from the east of England? Yes, the young woman at the end there.
I'm Lauren Wilson, Member of Youth Parliament for East Suffolk. Did you know 70% of people on earth will go through mental health alone? Mental health is still terrible with help, and going through it alone could really affect people now and forever. So this needs to change. Just think, 70% of people go through it alone. They have no one by their side. No counsellors, no assistance, no access to services, and most importantly, no one by their side to help them and guide them along their way. It's important we have to stop We need to stop going through mental health and mental health alone. We as MYPs need to vote so young people aren't alone. This is a very pertinent issue which needs to be solved and tackled in any way we can. 70% of people alone, they have suffered in silence with no voice. The change I would like to see is people working together and end the stigma that has made us and too many people suffer behind closed doors. I would like more mental health spoken about in schools to raise awareness. A young person may not even know their problem is categorised as mental health. We can change that. 70% of young people go through mental health alone. We can change that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, my friends, to conclude the debate, I ask you to welcome with great enthusiasm the concluding speaker from the southeast of England who will wind up the debate, Eleanor Burnaby-Rouse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, in the autumn budget, we were presented with the news that an extra £2 billion of funding will be going towards mental health services, including services for young people. It is undeniable that this is a good thing. But this news, combined with the fact that we've had mental health as a campaign before, may lead many to question whether we should even consider this as our campaign for 2019. However, we should not use funding announcements and previous campaign attempts as an excuse to pack up our campaigning and move on to a topic we haven't explored before. If anything, now is the ideal time to be considering mental health as our devolved campaign. As we move on from raising awareness, this campaign could be us actively working with decision makers to ensure our mental health services are best suited to us as young people and are going to provide us with the most support. After all, surely it's better for us to make sure we're involved in influencing for the betterness and benefit of young people rather than sitting on the sideline and letting these changes happen to us without our input. In this debate, we have been encouraged to think about the underlying issues that contribute to ill mental health, such as how we are tested in schools. We also know that our services are running at their capacity. In July this year, there was a record 409,356 active referrals in England surrounding mental health for children under the age of 19. I think of which 55,750 were new referrals according to NHS figures. I think we can all agree, including yourself, Mr. Speaker, and esteemed guests such as Mr. Corbyn and Diane Abbott, that these are absolutely shocking and that we need to work on this and more needs to be done to ensure that earlier support and intervention is provided to young people so they don't suffer through a battle with their own mind. There are, however, organisations which are already trying to tackle this by helping to build emotional resilience and well-being amongst young people, such as Head Start. Head Start is currently only available in 6 local areas in the UK and is funded by the Big Lottery Fund as a 5-year programme, meaning the programme is scheduled to end in 2021. I personally have been able to see the effectiveness of projects such as Head Start as it runs in my local area in Kent. Projects like this are supporting young people with their emotional well-being by providing training and resources to teachers so they can provide support as well as directly talking to and helping young people by helping to tackle stress and build up resilience. Quite simply, organisations like this are key forms of early prevention for ill mental health. But the short-term nature of their funding means their impact is limited, as they are simply unable to reach all the young people that may need their support and are not even available to young people in many parts of the country. With the announcement of funding last week, we need our influence to work and support smaller organisations and projects which already help young people with their mental health in a more sustainable, long-term way that reduces chances of them having to seek help in the future. When voting later today, I ask everyone in the chamber to consider the significance of mental health and how poor mental health has the ability to impact every single one of us. We can stand up and fight for our vision, dreams and goals of having a healthy mind, or we can stand back and hope our minds are in the safe hands when new facilities and resources are introduced without our input. That decision, MYPs, is up to you. Thank you.
Eleanor, thank you for speaking to us with such passion, force and conviction. And believe me, I've noticed, as other colleagues would have done, the far greater frequency with which this issue is raised in Parliament on both sides of the House. I've heard Jeremy raise it from the front bench in questioning of the Prime Minister. I've heard members from the government side raise the issue. And it's absolutely right that we should be reminded, not least by young people here today on other occasions, of the premium that we should attach to this, frankly, too long overlooked and underrated issue. It's magnificent that you have spoken in the way that you have and that so many people have contributed to such effect. Just before we proceed to the next debate, again consistent with referring to people, I just want to mention, present in the under gallery from the Society of Biology, and who pointed out to me a few moments ago that the Science and Technology Committee will be discussing the issue of mental health next week, a real friend of Parliament and indeed of young people. I'm referring to Stephen Benn. And anybody who knows me knows I regularly highlight examples of brilliant parliamentarians on both sides of the chamber. I often refer in speeches around the country to my friend, and he is my friend, Ken Clarke, who's the father of the House at the moment and one of the great parliamentarians of his generation. Well, on the Labour benches, Tony Benn, who sadly passed away in early 2014, spent nearly half a century as a Member of Parliament and stood up and fought for what he believed. And you know, I used to tease Tony, whom I hugely admired, by rather pathetically, inadequately imitating him. He had the most extraordinary, resonant and memorable voice. And in later years, towards the end of his life, I heard him several times in several places deliver the same very, very short and telling speech with which Stephen and his brother Hilary and all the family will be well familiar. Tony used to say, and remember it because it matters, Tony used to say this: whenever I meet anybody with power, I always ask that person 5 questions. What power have you got? Who gave it to you? In whose interests do you exercise it? To whom are you accountable? And how can we get rid of you? And those are very powerful words. Tony knew the importance of bottom-up pressure. Sadly, he's not with us now, but he believed in young people. He certainly believed in the Youth Parliament. And I remember him once saying to me, you know, John, the only purpose of the old is to offer encouragement to the young. And I think that's a magnificent mindset. So, Stephen, thank you for being with us, and thank you through you. Thanks for all he did. The Youth Parliament will now consider the 5th and final motion of the day, put an end to knife crime. The full motion is printed on the order paper. To move the motion, please welcome from the east of England, Imogen White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hundreds upon thousands of young people are living on a knife edge, fearing for their lives and turning to a violent weapon just to feel safe in their local communities. Nearly 3 years ago to this day, I walked home from buying a bar of chocolate at my local shop through a police cordon. A young man had been stabbed in the next road. Now, members of Youth Parliament, I am lucky that my link to this issue is relatively distant, but yet still significant. I don't live in London, Birmingham, Manchester or Liverpool. No, I live in a small, leafy village in the home counties. This issue is not exclusive to densely populated inner cities, but it affects every single one of us and our constituents. I can still recall the fear I felt that night 3 years ago. This is the same fear that has led to nearly 200,000 young people putting a cross in the box and voting for the End Knife Crime motion. It is the same fear that causes young people to vote for this issue, that leads to more and more young people carrying a knife just to feel safe. The knife crime epidemic is crippling our nation, changing our perception of what it is to feel safe and unnecessarily taking too many young lives. We simply cannot allow this to continue. The lives of young people who carry knives are being put at risk. This is obvious, but what about the ripple effect? The many more young people who are affected by these horrific stabbings, their friends, their cousins, and their siblings. As it stands, all young people are at risk, and the catastrophic effects last a lifetime. We, as members of Youth Parliament, have a duty to those young people who voted to end knife crime. Clearly, current approaches, such as increased use of stop and searches, have not addressed the issue. So we must campaign to ensure that our government focuses resources on mental and physical health, education, youth services, social media and community outreach in order to treat this as a public health issue. Let's finally remove the fear factor. We need to vote for this motion, campaign to end knife crime and prevent any more young lives from being unnecessarily taken. Thank you.
Wow, Imogen, thank you for that. Now, to oppose the motion from the northeast of England, I urge you, exhort you, plead with you enthusiastically to welcome Kellen Hadfield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I represent the young people of the mighty Redcar in the northeast of England, and I would like to thank each and every one of them for giving me the opportunity to be here today. Knife crime. A standalone campaign or part of a much bigger issue. Whilst of course I commend the motion, which topped this year's Make Your Mark ballot, I believe it fails to recognise that knife crime is a part of a much bigger issue, gang crime. 1 in 10 to 15-year-olds know a member of a street gang, and 1 in 100 are members of one. These very gang members are over 5.5 times more likely to carry a knife than their non-gang member counterparts. So clearly, if we are to truly succeed with this motion, it would require tough action on gang membership, as well as the measures such as limiting advertising, education, and providing role models, as this motion outlines. Both the Youth Parliament and the Government agree that to end the knife crime epidemic would require work across education, health, the youth services, victim services, housing, as well as policing and law enforcement. Mr. Speaker, is a campaign part of an issue so broad really one which the Youth Parliament could solve in a year? Or would it be like attempting to empty a running bath with an egg cup? That's where I am. It is my belief that knife crime is simply part of an issue too broad and too complex to be the Youth Parliament's campaign. Furthermore, in the past year, the Government has announced several policies which go some way to achieving our knife crime goal. For example, the motion calls on the Government to categorise knife crime as a public health issue. However, in April, it was announced that the Government would take a public health approach, with the Home Office announcing a serious violence strategy. This includes £11 million of funding for an early intervention youth fund, and a further £1 million to support community groups and charities related to young people affected by or at risk of knife crime. Then, in June, the Offensive Weapons Bill was passed, restricting the sale of bladed articles and making it an offence to carry a knife in any educational institution. Mr. Speaker, we must remember that knife crime is already a part of the Youth Parliament's manifesto. Of course, something we believe in, but not necessarily the right choice for our devolved campaign. Of course, we want to end knife crime. Of course, we want to end gang crime. But at a time when this issue is receiving more media attention than ever before, and with a government clearly aware of the issue, would this campaign really be the right decision for the Youth Parliament to make? Let's get behind the government let's get behind the government on this issue. Let's stand with them. But let's focus our campaign on another. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kellen. Now, again, I'm afraid we're looking for really short, sharp speeches. Who have we got wanting to contribute from the northwest of England? Yes, the young woman here has been waiting for some time. Yeah, please.
Ellie Walsh, Youth MP for Blackburn with Darwen. Taz, JJ, Jim, Ashley are just a few of the young people stabbed to death in Blackburn with Darwen. Why today have the young people of my constituency feel like it's not safe to walk down the street on their own unless they are carrying a knife? We need to raise awareness of this, not just make it a public health issue. We need to teach people in the curriculum for life the repercussions of carrying knives. Thank you.
What about the southwest? The southwest, yes. The gentleman on the back row with the blue suit, which is buttoned, light blue suit. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. I'm Will Daniel, representing West Cornwall. Coming from the West Country, this might seem like an alien issue that few people have experienced, but any issue that affects the health and well-being of the young people of Great Britain deserves to be our campaign like this. And if you come from an unaffected area, as I do, you can still work on this campaign to ensure that this epidemic does not spread further than it already has. So please take this opportunity to vote for this motion and help make society safer for your constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, what willing contributors do we have from the southeast of England? Oh, overcome with excitement. Fizzing, veritably fizzing. The woman on the back row, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Catherine Brooks, Hampshire. Since the beginning of this month alone, 3 boys between the ages of 15 and 17 have all been stabbed to death, which is simply unacceptable. We need to create safe spaces for young people to meet, not on street corners or takeaways where knife crime might thrive. Having more youth clubs in the local communities could mean the difference of young lives being risked or not since they will have somewhere to go and not meet down back alleyways where dangerous knife crime may thrive, like I already said. Let's tackle this issue head on so no more young people are put in danger. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, what about Yorkshire and Humberside? Yes, the gentleman with the cream jacket and waistcoat. Yeah, let's...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name is Arkham Aldeed, MYP from Leeds. MYPs, it is fair enough we can gather in this chamber and report these statistics, but I believe our job is more than that. We must go out there and speak to our young constituents who have put their faith in us by electing us as their representatives. Mr. Speaker, let me share with this House the tragedy of my constituent, Iffy. After talking to his close friends, I found that Iffy was a peaceful, calm, intelligent 16-year-old. Unfortunately, he was a victim of knife violence after he was stabbed in his heart by 16-year-olds and left to suffer on the streets of Harehills, where he later passed away. This is Iffy, who had a bright future ahead of him. This is Iffy, who could have helped his community. Mr. Speaker, how many more people need to be stabbed for this government to realise and put appropriate measures in place? Instead of increasing the number of police officers in our streets, the number of police officers has been dropped by 15% since 2010. MYPs, that is over 21,000 less police officers on our streets. That is 21,000 less police officers protecting our youth and communities. But MYPs, we can still do a lot. We must inform those individuals who believe that by carrying a knife they're safer. Indeed, they're not. By carrying a knife, they're putting their life, and most importantly, the life of others, in danger. I would like to end on this note for the young people who are watching us today. Let's invest in our future. And Britain needs you alive, so please don't carry a knife. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Now, who do we have wanting to contribute from Wales? Yeah. Yeah, I'm actually going to take the young... Forgive me, the young woman next to you. It's very difficult to have everybody, but yeah, please, your good self. Yes?
Diolch yn fawr, Mr Speaker. I'm Charlie Oliver Holland, representing Monmouthshire in South Wales. Did you know knives are the most common weapons used in the killings of young people? The youth of the UK are suffering day in, day out, due to the fact that nothing is being done about this. Year by year, knife crime and other related forms of gang violence are increasing. In this year's Make Your Mark ballot in my constituency, knife crime was one of the top 3 voted priority issues. Considering that in 2017, there were only 25 reported incidents of knife crime in Monmouthshire, this suggests that even if young people are not directly affected by this issue, they are definitely frightened by the idea. Knife crime is ruining and killing hundreds of innocent young lives every year. Lives filled with a mountain of potential for future, the potential to be an amazing politician like Jeremy, teacher or inventor, is taken away by another person instantly with one horrendous mistake. It would be insane to suggest that the life of a young person isn't a priority issue. Imagine if that was your own brother, sister or cousin. We need urgently to put an end to this outrage to protect our country. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a would-be speaker from Northern Ireland? Yes, sir. Let's hear from you.
Thomas Dorse, Mid-Ulster. Well, I can't deny, Mr Speaker, that reported cases of knife crime has actually decreased across Northern Ireland, even though it has skyrocketed across England. But however, this doesn't take into consideration instances of young people performing acts which involve crimes which are not officially reported to the police, such as bringing knives into school for the intimidation of other young people, and many other instances. This can bring untold grief to many, many young people. And also, isolated cases exist wherein young people, for whatever reason, are stabbed and knives are used against them to harm and even kill them. So I will say that this is the key problem in my eyes regarding knife crime, is that there never is one solution to this. It's a combination of a variety of other factors. And this isn't just an issue that you can just fire money at, one single issue in the hope of securing it and fixing it. But if you want to solve knife crime, in my opinion, then you have to eradicate poverty first, as it, in my opinion, is the key cause of knife crime. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now, who do we have from London who wants to take part? Yeah, yourself, please.
I'm Sia Weiss from the London Borough of Hounslow.
Hounslow?
Yeah.
Hounslow.
At the start of our journey together as NYPs, I introduced a motion on adopting a public health approach to knife crime, and have been delighted to see so many other NYPs from around the UK moving their own motions and campaigning hard on this issue. Young people in my own borough, as well as many other NYPs sat around me, have been involved in supporting the work of the Youth Violence Commission and the All-Party Parliamentary Group, and it was great to see the Make Your Mark result being mentioned in this very chamber last week. Talking of Make Your Mark, wow, we did it. 1.1 million votes, and the biggest mandate we've ever had. Every young person in this room and all the youth workers up there in the gallery deserve to be proud of themselves. Yeah. And what we did, what did we do with those 1.1 million young people? And what did these 1.1 million young people tell us? More young people voted for this issue than any other. More English regions made it their top issue than any other, and it topped the vote in the top 4 local authority areas by percentage turnout, including Hounslow, obviously. If there is will for change on this issue amongst young people, there is political will for change here at Westminster. Whether we see the need for a violence reduction unit and a public health approach as pioneered so successfully in Scotland and endorsed here by London's Mayor, or the Home Secretary's recent proposals to increase levels of stop and search, this debate is happening now, and we cannot neglect our duty to bring young people's voices into it. If we are to have a policy in this country that can robustly protect young people from knife crime whilst respecting our rights and freedoms, and can provide a scientific, evidence-based reduction in violence whilst not failing to understand youth violence in the wider context of race, class and austerity, we need to make young people's voices heard, and the best way to do this is to make this issue our national campaign. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the north-east of England. Yes, your good self. You were very quick off the mark.
I'm Leo Shazad and I'm from Newcastle upon Tyne. Firstly, I'd like to challenge a common misconception about stop and searches. So stop and searches, although they are now being increased by many police forces, they were originally asked to decrease them, which was when knife crime started to increase drastically. But I'm not going to stand here and tell you that knife crime hasn't risen. It has, and you can't dispute it. In fact, incidents of knife crime have shot up by almost a third in the north-east. But I am still going to ask you to not vote for it to be our national campaign. Now, I know how you're all looking at me, I can hear all the whispers, but I want you to allow me to offer you a comparison. So, despite the increase, the number of offences in the north-east is smaller than in many other parts of the country. There were 38 offences for every 100,000 in the region, compared to 51 in the northwest, 64 in Yorkshire, and 137 in London. According to Northumbria Police, most of the increases can be attributed to better recording methods and the fact that officers are now recording some incidents as crimes that would not have been crimes in the past. So in Northumbria, we've actually had more bike thefts reported between September 2017 and August 2018. London accounts for roughly 15% of the population in the UK, but it also accounts for 28% of the latest rise in knife crime, and more than a third of all the children and teens killed by knives in 2017. As much as I love the overinflated and manipulated and anecdotal evidence provided by the media, which is intended to scare us into believing that this is a problem in every region across the UK and that it's the same as in London in every region, which it isn't. Instead, I'd like you to vote for something that can be represented in every region.
Well, that was a very succinct summary. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Now, we've got time for one more contributor, I think, from Scotland. Who wants to contribute from Scotland? You do, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My name is Josh Kennedy and I represent the West of Scotland. Knife crime is increasingly becoming an epidemic of our generation. From London to Glasgow, knife crime often dominates the news. My area hasn't gone unhurt, with the media dubbing one weekend in late September as the Paisley murder bloodbath. Renfrewshire, my home, and its next door neighbour, Inverclyde, have been named as the worst areas in the country in terms of homicide, of which is heavily related to knife crime. So much so that 4.3 per every 100,000 people have been affected, topping the likes of New York City. This reeking stench that is knife crime has ingrained itself into our society, and it's about damn time that we do something about this. It's frankly an utter farce that so little has been done to tackle this key issue. We need to stand up and be heard, in turn lobbying our decision makers to take action, before more of our friends, family and loved ones are hurt. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. A speaker, please, from the East Midlands. Who have we got from the East Midlands? Yeah, yes, the gentleman here, right at the front.
I'm Louis Milligan.
Who you are, and really speak up so everybody can hear what you've got to say. We want to hear you.
I'm Louis Milligan, NYP for South Derbyshire. I think knife crime is something that should not be anything. So say like you're out on an adventure on your own. You or your child, your mum, your dad, someone in your family, they get stabbed, you won't find out because they're on their own. There is a borderline for knife crime, so I say no to knife crime and yes to a country with no knife crime. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm trying to squeeze as many people in. The East of England. Who have we got from the East of England? Yes, the woman here with the red top.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name's Isabel Botley and I'm an MYP for Essex. I just want to touch over a brief victimise that happened recently. On the 5th of November in Tulse Hill in London, a boy named John, aged 16, fell as Britain's 250th knife crime victim. And to reiterate, he died in the street later that night. I want to highlight something. 16. That boy was the same age as myself and perhaps many others of you in this room. And that is no age for a life to be taken. And even the more shocking fact is that the youngest recent knife crime victim was aged 13. It's a terrifying epidemic spreading throughout London, paralysing youth with fear. Fear to go to school and leaving school with it being branded as stabbing hour, and fear to go to the park or even leave their own street. In February, 250 knives were seized within 1 week. That is a week. 183 of them were by teens and they were arrested for carrying knives. So we asked the question, why carry? I quote from a boy, aged 15, from South East London. Boys carry blades as they want protection from each other. What kind of society are we living in where people have to carry knives as they want protection from each other? Sadiq Khan recently spoke saying, solving the issue of knife crime will take a decade. What will happen in that decade? And that is known uncertainty. And we all know this is an issue that will not solve itself over time. So I urge you today to seek change and to vote for this monumentous issue that goes from region to region, from Bedford to Great Yarmouth, from regions in London to Manchester to Wales. It will affect every single, not person intimately, but affect us in some way. And we speak of votes at 16 today, but how can we vote for a government that is struggling to protect us? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now, I want to hear a contribution from the West Midlands. Oh, this is an extraordinary state of affairs. Yeah, well, you're all so keen. I tell you what, you can have a minute each, and I'll call two, but it has to be a minute each. Is that a deal? Right, we'll hear from you first. Please.
Wes Khan from Birmingham. For 11 years now, I've known this one boy my entire life. I call him my right-hand man, my brother. Recently, unfortunately, he was stabbed and killed. And when he did pass away, the general question I asked everyone that's involved in gangs that I live in, because I live in a very poor and socio-economic, deprived area. A lot of them say, why do you get involved? The simple answer is they have no other way. They have no hope, no aspirations, no other option really. They have that lack of opportunity involved. They have that lack of hope in them. So when he did pass away, a lot of these gang members did put down the thing, knowing that when I put myself forward and talked about the MYP, being from that kind of area and knowing those types of people involved with knives, guns, gang crime in general, they all told me the same thing. When you have that hope and that aspiration with yourself, you know what you're doing. And with that opportunity in society, you'll be fine. But unfortunately, there's that unequal opportunity for everyone in society. And due to that, a lot of people just automatically go into that gang life and that lifestyle, which is not what they want. And that's why we should put this motion forward to give equal opportunity for everyone in society right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I also indicated I would hear from you, and I'm going to try to get one more person in, but no promises. A brief contribution.
Do you know that you are 5 times more likely to be stabbed by the knife you are carrying with you than one someone else is carrying? Did you know that 10 months into 2018, we had already topped the amount of knife crime than in 2017? I think that the fact people are so scared of today's society that they have to carry a weapon with them in the 21st century is appalling and needs to be dealt with. I believe that a way to solve this problem is through a word beginning with E, ending with N, and has 9 letters: education. By teaching young people about the dangers of carrying a knife, we will be a step further in minimising the amount of innocent lives being taken on our streets. So I urge you to vote this motion motion this afternoon.
Thank you. Now, I think the last contributor I'm going to call is from the South East. He has been gesticulating at me with some intensity and persistence for a considerable period of time, which others have done as well. I just want, before I call him, to say one thing, and that is I'm sorry. It happens every year. I'm sorry that I can't call each and every one of you to speak, which I'd love to do, but there just isn't time, and that's actually the worst thing. I think about it endlessly, but we can't have everybody, and I'm very, very apologetic. There's no agenda to stop people speaking. It's just time's our problem. But I have tried to ensure that there's a decent gender balance. We've monitored it throughout, and that every part of the country and the constituent nations of the United Kingdom has been heard. And with that, and as I say, my tendering of apologies, let's hear from our friend here from the South East of England, who's going to say.
My name is Atya Nikej from the London Borough of Camden. The impact of knife crime on individuals is undeniable. And while politicians wish to police their way out of the knife crime epidemic, it is simply not possible. We must focus on the root causes of knife crime: poverty, inequality, austerity, and a lack of opportunity. We must petition the government to put reason over rhetoric, compassion over indifference, equality over austerity, as knife crime claims more lives within our country. Never has so much been lost by so many because of the indecision of so few. We must stand for lives above knives. We must put knife crime first. Thank you, Youth Parliament.
Thank you. I hope you'll agree, my friends, that was worth waiting for. It truly was worth waiting for, and thank you. Now, Jeremy's about to travel outside London, but he's just said to me this is the best-informed Parliament that he's witnessed. The best-informed Parliament that he's witnessed. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. The Youth Parliament will now vote on which of the 5 subjects... Oh, I beg your pardon, the front bench wind-up. The front bench wind-up. I do beg your pardon. I'm getting carried away. We're not there yet. We're going to have the front bench wind-up in this, our final debate. To conclude, from the West Midlands, please give a very warm and enthusiastic welcome to Haroon Ershad.
Oh my. Shukriya, Mr. Speaker. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much. To all that inhabit this famous room for changing democracy, and to my fellow NYPs, I would like to dedicate this speech to those who have fallen victim to knife crime across the UK. We look at knife crime as a threat to our society, and rightly so. Young people's lives are on the line as we walk about in major cities such as Manchester, my very own Birmingham, and the city we are in today, London. We've heard about the efforts being made by government, charities and campaigns to begin to tackle knife crime with initiatives such as the knife bins in Erdington, Birmingham, whilst also highlighting the campaign No Knives, Better Lives. We've heard that the government has allocated £1 million for community groups and £10 million for an early action fund to begin to tackle knife crime. But is this enough when we are still having our lives stolen from us because of a household object? It is important we recognise that knife crime is just one branch of the gang crime culture in the UK. Gangs are formed when a vast number of lower-class, deprived young people are left with nothing else to do, nowhere to go, where money is diminished and where all hope is lost. Gangs are a representation of a never-ending snowball effect which rolls on, grows bigger and sucks young people into a spiralling vortex of committing violent crimes. So you better believe I think that gangs are a hammering threat to us as young people. I'll be the first to hold my hand up and say that violence will never stop. But it must be suppressed for the betterment of our young people, with violence being varied and targeted. In the West Midlands, there are 25 gun crimes per 100,000 people, being higher than London. We have seen a 40% rise in hate crime even, from 2016 to 2018, with 52% being aimed at Muslims. And in Derry, Northern Ireland, on the week of the Troubles, 74 petrol bombs in one night were thrown at the police. I warn you, NYPs, there is more to stats than meets the eye. This is an opportunity for us to use our influence as youth representatives to encourage decision makers to open their eyes and look at what's harming our society. The long-term factors such as the impact cuts to youth services has had on youth violence is quite damning to see in urban areas, and this idea, and you're not going to believe I'm going to say this, clout. How people rate you with the actions you perform in a gang, as well as scoreboards in pavements, in alleyways, for the amount of people you've stabbed is abhorrent and is something that needs to be tackled on the ground through the roots in its immediacy. I now dedicate this speech to those who have fallen victim to knife crime and gang crime. As we moved to the end of this enriched day of debating, it's crucial for us to remember our roles as representatives of our local areas. Tackling knife crime is the #1 issue from the Make Your Mark ballot, and as we've heard, is an epidemic plaguing young people's lives. It's our chance to stand up and change democracy, and we've got the perfect opportunity to do so as we go to vote. So today, my fellow NYPs, we are left with the keys on 3 issues to saving the lives of hundreds and thousands of young people. What more? What more is there left to say? Thank you very much.
Haroon, thank you for completing the debates with pizzazz, with gusto, and with your very own personal supply of electricity. I think we're extremely appreciative of what you've done, and I'm appreciative, and I know my parliamentary colleagues are appreciative of all of the contributions which we've heard today, which have been stunningly good, and partly stunningly good because of the quality of the delivery, but above all stunningly good because of the content, the nature of the message, and because it is palpably clear. It is undeniably obvious that the speeches have been authentic, that people have spoken both from head and from heart. And that, frankly, is what makes a great contribution to public debate. My friends, the Youth Parliament will now vote on which of the 5 subjects debated today it will select as its 2 national campaign issues for 2018. In the lobby, my friends, you will be given 2 ballot papers. 1 white paper for the 2 reserved, that is to say, UK-wide subjects, and 1 green paper for the 3 devolved, for today's purposes, England-only subjects. You should place an X across in the box next to the subject for which you would like to vote on each ballot paper, and hand the completed ballot papers to the doorkeepers in the lobbies. Afterwards, please return to your place in the chamber. Those of you on my right should leave the chamber by the door behind me and turn left into the eye lobby behind you. Those on my left should leave by the doors at the far end and turn left into the no lobby behind you. Members of the House of Commons staff will be on hand to assist you. Friends and colleagues, the division lobbies, I'm pleased to advise you, are now open. See you ere long.
did get one emailed to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have the group photograph now, so you won't be going back to your seats. We need you on the floor, well, most of you on the floor of the House. So...
if they're ready. Yeah.
Okay, friends. Now, I hope you can give a simple answer to this question, and I hope the answer is yes. Have you all voted? Yes! Good. Thank you. Okay, now, members of the Youth Parliament will now make speeches on the anniversary of the 1918 Representation of the People Act. First, I call from the East Midlands, please welcome Molly Lambert.
Well, I really wanted to make a joke about dancing up here like Teresa, but thank you for stealing that. And thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to start my speech by asking anyone in here that identifies as a woman to raise their hand. I'd like you to look around and notice that if we were sat here as we are, but 100 years ago, half of this room, over half of this room, would be empty. Simply because the women currently occupying the seats, the people currently occupying the seats, are women. That's why, as a woman, I'm so thankful for being here, being listened to, being free to choose a career, a partner, my place in society, all things I would not have the opportunity to do if not for the work of these suffragettes of the past. Whilst they were campaigning only for the vote, to them and to me, it was more than that. The vote was power, it was freedom. Since that time, the purpose of feminism has become misunderstood in today's society. I've often heard feminism isn't needed because we have equality. But the fact that according to Girls Not Brides, 1 in 5 young women are married off as child brides, and the fact that young women around the world are still denied an access to education simply because they are women, says that we still need feminism. What I'm saying relates to the Representation of the People Act 1918, because these suffragettes dedicated themselves to fighting for equality, equality that's still lacking all over the world. We must reclaim feminism, use it to make positive, effective, needed change, because that's what feminism is. We need to make change like these suffragettes did. We need to reclaim it for the millions of women out there who can't be heard because they are being silenced. But we are not being silenced. We have a voice. So why aren't we making any noise? I could have stood up here and simply said thank you to the wonderful people who won some women the right to vote. But I believe they'd much rather prefer for me to stand here and tell you to go out and keep fighting for women less fortunate than ourselves. Thank yous don't cause change. Actions do. And actions are the greatest thank you we could give the women who enabled me to stand here today and be listened to. And with that, thank you for listening to me.
Molly, thank you for a poignant and truly beautiful speech, which I think will linger in the memories of all present, I hope, for a long time to come. You absolutely lived up to the occasion, and you can be very proud of that. Friends, I now call from the east of England, Rachel Ojo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Representation of the People Act was the beginning of the inclusion of women in our political system. It changed the mindsets of people at the time and meant that women were one step closer in their struggle for equality. I strongly believe that this event should be celebrated to highlight the political injustices that women once endured. And it pains me to know that other women in the past did not have a say in who governed the country and did not have a say in issues that affected them. I am passionate about the rights of women, and I definitely hold this act in high regard as the beginning of a new democratic era. The women of Essex played their part in the campaign for the Votes for Women. Sisters Dorothea and Madeline Rock from Ingatestone both joined the Women's Social and Political Union. In 1911, both were sentenced for smashing windows. In a newspaper account, one of the sisters stated, "This thing was not done as wanton damage, but as a protest against being deprived of the vote." The alderman in charge was unmoved, saying the women must be either criminals or lunatics, giving them imprisonment with hard labour. They both went on to make a difference. They both went on to speak at suffragette meetings in Essex and continue till this day to be an inspiration to many women, to be an inspiration to women like myself and other women in this house today. Is it too much to ask for women to have the same rights as men? As a youth parliament, we must continue to work towards a goal where everyone and anyone knows the importance and power held in every single vote. Thank you.
Rachel, thank you very much indeed. I hope you enjoyed giving that speech as much as the members of the Youth Parliament and wider audience will have enjoyed hearing it. Next, I call from London, Surura Ibrahim.
It's been 100 years, 100 fruitful years of fighting for justice. But it's been 105 years since Emily Wilding Davison threw herself under the king's horse with courage in her heart, passion flowing through her veins, and justice in her mind. I am proud to say that Emily was born in southeast London on the 11th of October in the year 1872. She refused to accept the way of a male-dominated society, and so she gained a first-class degree from Oxford University, even though women were not allowed to gain degrees at the time. In 1906, she joined the WSPU, founded by Emmeline Pankhurst. She was the suffragette famously known for hiding in the broom cupboard during the night of the 1911 census. That way, she was able to record her address as being in the House of Commons on the night of the 1911 census. Emmeline Pankhurst wrote in her book that Emily decided that only the loss of her life would put an end to the intolerable treatment of women. And so Emily Wilding Davison threw herself under the king's horse with courage in her heart, passion flowing through her veins, and justice in her mind. Her headstone reads, "Deeds, not words." It's been 100 years, 100 fruitful years of fighting for justice. But it's been 105 years since Emily Wilding Davison showed us that deeds, not words, will put an end to the intolerable treatment of women. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was some moving and charismatic speech. Surura, thank you very much indeed. From the northwest of England, I now call Samar Khalil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It has been 100 years since all men and some women were given the right to vote. The Representation of the People Act of 1918 was the first step towards women's voices being heard. It paved the way for the Representation of the People Equal Franchise Act, 10 years later, which saw women being given the vote on equal terms with men. As a woman stood speaking in the Houses of Parliament 100 years on from that first act in 1918, I cannot help but feel indebted to those women who fought so hard to not only have their voices heard, but the voices of all women recognised. A major group crucial to that fight for the right to vote was the Women's Social and Political Union. more commonly known as the suffragettes. The 1901 petition for the vote, signed by almost 30,000 working women in the Northwest textile mills, inspired the formation of the WSPU in Manchester in 1903, the organisation fundamental in the fight for women's rights. The first London branch was formed by the docks of Canning Town by a suffragette from my own hometown of Oldham. Her name was Annie Kenny. Her impact was so great that my local MP, Jim McMahon, has been working tirelessly towards placing a statue of her in our centre. Annie Kenny's political activism, it started much like my own, in Oldham, with the belief that it doesn't matter where you come from, as long as you know that what you're fighting for is right. It does not matter how much resistance there may be, as long as you are willing to keep defending your cause and to never give up. Annie Kenny went above and beyond to ensure that we lived in a fair democratic society where, regardless of gender, we had an equal say, an equal voice, an equal influence in decision-making. 100 years on, here I am, stood grateful for those women and what they achieved, but I'm also determined, as they would want, to never become complacent and to never forget that their fight is far from over. I know women, friends, that still, even today, struggle to be able to speak out. The legacy of women like Annie Kenny and the Pankhursts is what we have to remind us of the importance of equality. It is their dedication to deeds, not words, that we must all remember, not just as elected representatives of young people, but as the force for change. We have a duty to hold ourselves and our adult leaders to account, to ensure that they fulfill the deeds that they promise in order to create a better future. A future where young people's voices in democracy is just as women's was then, is no longer something to be frowned upon or laughed at, but the norm for a fair democratic society. We can do this. We will do this. My fellow NYPs, no more words, just deeds. Thank you.
Samar, thank you for that. This really is the highlight of the year, is it not? It's just a wonderful and awe-inspiring occasion, and to witness the progress of this Parliament I regard as a great privilege. Now I want to welcome and ask you to welcome from Northern Ireland our next speaker, Anna McAlany.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look at our leaders across the UK. Arlene Foster in Northern Ireland, Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland, Theresa May here in London, and of course Carwyn Jones in Wales. 3/4 of the leaders of our nations are women. And yet to me it's almost unthinkable that 100 years ago these women wouldn't even have been able to vote, let alone become leaders of some of the biggest parties in UK politics. The first suffrage society in Ireland was the North of Ireland Women's Suffrage Society, formed in 1872 by Isabella Todd, a Scotswoman who'd been educated at home by her mother, who was from County Monaghan. In 1909, the group changed their name to the Irish Women's Suffrage Society, and in 1912 carried out the first recorded suffrage militant act in Ireland by smashing the windows of the General Post Office in Belfast. Suffrage in Ireland didn't receive the same amount of attention as suffrage in the rest of the UK, mainly because of a little thing called the Home Rule movement. Although votes for women was an issue which crossed the divide between Unionists and Nationalists at the time, something which I think our politicians in Northern Ireland today could probably learn a little something from. Thank you.
Anna, thank you. We should all remember those words, and I hope that we will. Next from Scotland, please welcome Abigail Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to speak to you today about an inspiring woman who was one of the leaders of the suffrage cause in Scotland in the early 20th century. That woman is Elsie Inglis. Elsie Inglis is well known as one of the first female doctors in Scotland. But Elsie's other claim to fame is that she also campaigned for women to gain the right to vote. When people think about the fight for women's votes, many will think first of suffragettes. But there was more than one side to the suffrage movement. Elsie Inglis, as a suffragist, believed that the fight for women's votes could and should be peaceful and democratic. Elsie was the secretary of the Scottish Federation of Women's Suffrage Societies. She worked tirelessly for the suffrage cause, speaking at up to 4 meetings a week across Scotland. When the First World War arrived, Elsie offered to set up hospitals staffed by qualified women. But in response to the offer, the War Office told her to go home and sit still. As you can guess, Elsie did not go home and sit still. Instead, she set up a field hospital staffed entirely by women, which helped save hundreds of soldiers' lives. This reinforced the suffragist message that women were equally as viable to society as men, and thus deserved the same voting rights. So, in summary, Elsie was a smart, driven, formidable and inspiring woman, and few people have made a greater contribution to the women's suffrage movement in Scotland. Thank you.
Abigail, thank you for that. Next, from the southeast of England, please welcome Ijama Obuju.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Crazy, determined, too emotional, fighters, dangerous, powerful. These are just some words used to describe the suffragettes in the 1900s. But the one word I would use to describe them is fearless. This is because, despite initially not knowing what the consequences of their actions would be, imprisonment, sexual assault, or even death for some, they still chose to fight endlessly for women's right to vote. Emmeline Pankhurst, a famous suffragette, once said, "We are here not because we are lawbreakers. We are here in our efforts to be lawmakers." Born on 14th July 1858, Emmeline Pankhurst never truly imagined that she would go on to help create a movement so big that young people like me would continue to remember and celebrate it for years to come. In 1908, she founded the Women's Social and Political Union with her 2 daughters, a militant-oriented group fighting to give British women the right to vote. However, the road to achieving this was not an easy one. Emmeline was arrested many times and even spent time in prison. However, she used her imprisonment to advantage by exposing the terrible treatment she received, gaining her media coverage and support from viewers and readers alike. Suffragettes like Emmeline Pankhurst have given young women like me not only the chance to vote in local and national elections, but have also inspired us to never give up fighting for things we all believe in. I turned 18 this year. With that, I gained the right to vote, a right that I will never ever take for granted. So, I ask you all to join me to never ever take our vote for granted. Thank you.
Ijama, thank you for that, and how powerful that message is about remembering that you've got that right to vote. I don't say use it or lose it. But in one sense, it's true that you either use it or you lose it, not in the sense that it is taken away from you, but in the sense that if you don't use it, you are losing the chance to shape and configure events. And, you know, I always find it frustrating if people say, oh, no, I'm not bothered, I don't think I shall take the trouble to vote. When you think of the struggles people went through to get the vote, and when you reflect upon the fact that around the world there are still huge numbers of people who don't have the right to vote, I would go so far as to say we have no moral right whatever to treat our right to vote with flippancy and have every moral obligation to treat it with respect. Let's hear now, my friends, from the South West, from Alana Milley-Penny.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an original poem about how imprisoned suffragette women chose to endure a hunger strike whilst in extra prison rather than take the easy option of a fine. The judge gave us two options: prison or a fine. We chose prison. Lock us up, we shout. Behind cold metal bars we stand, caged like animals in a circus, summoning our ideas, dreaming of what havoc we can cause. We have to rebel. I call for a hunger strike. 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 5 o'clock. All the meals left untasted. Will you not reconsider? No, only the press were willing to be fed. 2 days pass, they refuse to let us die. Too bad for their name. Force one. Our determination to withstand the pain was lost to power. Deprived jaws are prized apart, heads seized and bodies held down. Strangers' fingers trying to locate a gap, waiting for the inevitable surrender. Trembling with fear, a steel instrument was pressed against my bleeding gums. My jaws are wrenched apart. My jaws are wrenched apart, a rubber tube thrusted down my throat. I was unconscious of anything but a mad revolt of struggle. That's all. Gasping for breath and sobbing convulsively, my only thought being that I had to withstand days more of this torment. Bloody, bruised, and broken, we were empty. As exhausted as we were, we left our barred confinement filled with more passion than ever. The fires of hell are burning and no one can stop us now. It's a fierce war that will be celebrated by generations to come. We are determined. We are powerful. We are the women of the world. Thank you.
Ilana, thank you warmly for that. Now, the penultimate contributor who comes from the West Midlands and whom I want you enthusiastically to welcome is Mahfuza Kandokar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Saturday afternoon, the wardress forced me onto the bed and 2 doctors came in. While I was held down, a nasal tube was inserted. It is 2 yards long, with a funnel at the end. The end is put up the right and left nostril on alternative days. The sensation is most painful. The drums of the ear seem to be bursting and there is a horrible pain in the throat and the breast. The tube is pushed down 20 inches and the one holding the funnel pours the liquid down. This was part of the painful account of Mary Leigh, a suffragette from Manchester who was sentenced to 2 weeks imprisonment after conducting a rooftop protest at Bingley Hall, Birmingham on the 22nd of September 1909, where the Prime Minister at the time was addressing a meeting from which all women had been excluded. Leigh's graphic account of the horrors of force feeding was published while she was still in prison, and afraid that she might die and become a martyr, it was decided to release her. However, it was only a few days after that she ended up in prison again, elsewhere, for another act of defiance against the unfair voting system at the time. She was just one woman amongst countless others who are all equally as important as each other. And at one point they were all stuck in this continuous cycle of fighting for the women's right to vote, until the 6th of February 1918, when the Representation of the People Act was passed, reforming the electoral system in Great Britain and Ireland. And finally, they knew their breaths had not been wasted. Thank you.
Mafusa, thank you for that. Now, the final speech before our closing statements comes from a representative from the Yorkshire and Humber. Please welcome Sylvia Cullen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 101 years ago, I, as a young woman, would have been virtually voiceless. I would have been property, belonging to my father or husband. I would have been a commodity, used only to cook, clean and raise children. The idea that one day I would work, own a company or sit in a youth parliament such as the one that we all sit in would have been ridiculed. However, a monumental change was on the horizon. When, 100 years ago, the patriarchal society of the time decided to give women the vote, they were opening the door to a wave of change. Women now had to be listened to. Our opinions were now valid and important because we were now within the electorate and therefore of equal value to the men who had dominated our lives for so long. As is the case with all societal change, the battle was won, but the war still continuing. But nevertheless, the long-running tradition of silencing women was changing, and with it came a revolution like nothing ever seen before. The voice of the woman rang out. Kept down for too long, we rose and we shone. The battle for equality, both politically and societally, does continue for both men and women, and we must continue to fight and campaign until all are freed from prejudice based purely on gender. But to the women who gave their lives and freedom so that I may stand here today, equal to the men who surround me, I say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your courage, initiative and drive gave me the freedom to stand here today and address this assembly, and for that I am eternally indebted. I am named after suffragette Sylvia Pankhurst, and I can think of no better legacy to try and follow.
What a wonderful culmination of a sequence of closing speeches by youth parliamentarians, which I sense had a real resonance with everybody here present and with very, very large numbers of people, including all of those who voted in the Make Your Mark ballot around the country. It really is a most fitting and heartwarming conclusion to the youth parliament part of our proceedings, which of course is the overwhelming and most important part. Thank you again, each and every one of you who's just delivered that exceptional speech, for delivering it in terms both of your content and the obvious sincerity with which you articulated it. Now, I hope, as we approach the closing speeches of the whole day, you will give a very, very warm welcome to the Shadow Leader of the House of Commons, Valerie Vaz.
Thank you. I'm going to take you on the campaign trail. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for chairing these debates and for your commitment in ensuring that the Youth Parliament can be heard. You've made an incredible new innovation in this place. We thank you from the bottom of our heart, all of us, don't we? And if Mr. Speaker hadn't done that, we wouldn't be celebrating 10 years of the Youth Parliament. I've got some other thanks to make also. Thank you to the British Youth Council. your teachers, your supporters, your mentors, your family, all up there. Shall we say thank you? Everyone here in Parliament, the Sergeant-at-Arms and Phil and his team. There's Phil over there and his team. Also to the police and the education service, and of course to Jessica Taylor, our photographer, who silently goes about her work. Making historical documents, and of course to you, honourable members of the Youth Parliament. You've worked hard to come to this place, and for some of you it may just be one day, but for others it may be your future place of work. So just as you heard from the Prime Minister this morning welcoming you to this place, the Leader of the Opposition, who was here listening to you in your top debate, has wanted me to read out a message. And he said this: "It was a privilege to join you earlier and be able to watch the very high standard of discussion in your debate on knife crime. This is such an important subject which must be seriously tackled by our society so we can end a scourge that is taking the lives of too many people. The strength of the UK Youth Parliament is its celebration of democratic principles, the permanent right of all of us to be able to decide our own collective future, choose our representatives and pick our leaders. We also get to sack them too, if we wish." He said that. That matters because the great changes in history have always come from below. Real change happens when people come together and demand it. It is almost never handed down from leaders above. This year celebrates 100 years since the first women in the UK were able to vote, something which was only won by protest, struggle, and women demanding an equal voice in Parliament. Yet after all these years, we're still fighting for equality and still fighting for genuinely equal rights for all. I've always believed that the people who make the best decisions are those who are directly affected by or directly involved in the question at hand. It is absolutely right that young people, such as all of you, are given this platform to speak for yourselves about the issues you care about. After all, politics is about getting stuck in and speaking up for the causes you believe in. Right Honourable Jeremy Corbyn MP, Leader of the Opposition. Through Make Your Mark, over 1.1 million young people between the ages of 11 and 18 have voted. You have highlighted the scourge of knife crime, a 16% increase on the previous year and the highest number since 2011. We need to find out the causes of why someone feels the need to take a life and why those young lives are lost. They're doing that in Glasgow, and the Mayor of London is committed to doing the same. Vicky Foxcroft from Lewisham Deptford, she's an MP, works every day to find a reason. She's sorry she can't be here. She's delayed in her constituency. Your second topic, there are now more referrals to children and mental health services, about 186 a day. The Public Accounts Committee have recently held an inquiry into children's mental health, and we await their report. Last year, Tracy Crouch was here. She's the MP for Chatham and Aylesford. She knows the scourge on mental health of gambling and wants to stop it now. Your third topic, yes, you should be paid for the same work as everybody else. And today, we, well, not celebrate, but we remember Equal Pay Day, because that's the day that women do their work from now until the end of the year free, because we're not paid for the same as men, on the year that we celebrate 100 years of some women getting the vote, and also the injustice to the WASPy women. Your fourth topic, when there are homes standing empty, there shouldn't be homelessness. And of course, we agree with votes at 16. Democracy is only safe when we show up. And you showed up today to debate these important issues, just as other young people have showed up around the world. Tabitha Amaral de Pontes 24 years old, elected to the lower house in Brazil. She was here yesterday as one of the Women of the World MPs. Emma Gonzalez showed up when her friends were gunned down. She founded Never Again and the March for Our Lives. Young people from a school in Brent showed up yesterday demanding a real living wage for cleaners at football games. The suffragettes and the suffragists showed up. The young men who lost their lives so we could be here today and fought 2 world wars as we remember them, 100 years of the end of the First World War, showed up for us. I saw the installation, Blood, Sweat, Land and Seas of Red at the Tower of London, which commemorated the start of the First World War. It's the title of a poem by an unknown soldier from the First World War. 888,246 ceramic poppies represented British and colonial soldiers who lost their lives. And arts plays an important part in helping us understand the world, because I was lucky enough to go to the Royal Albert Hall on Tuesday this week for Music for Youth Proms. It was great to see the recorder, the xylophone and brass bands, and for the first time, a 21-year-old, Peter Morgan, composed the finale. He called it Let's Get Together, which is what you've done today. You got together to debate, to find a solution. You didn't denigrate each other, but you debated the issues. That's something that we can learn from you. So make sure you report back for Parliament Week next week in your school. Organise a debate on one of your topics, hear the voices of your colleagues, then write to your MP and say you want a debate. I've already asked that last week, that one of your topics should be debated in Parliament. Why not start an online petition? You only need 100,000 signatures and it has to be debated in Westminster Hall. So, honourable members of the Youth Parliament, you seized the day. You showed up. Thank you for gracing Parliament with your dignity, eloquence and passion.
Valerie, thank you from the bottom of my heart for that, and I think the reaction shows what colleagues, members of the Youth Parliament, thought of what you had to say. It was hugely appreciated. I'm now going to ask you to welcome the Speaker from the government benches, who is with us today, Andrew Bowie. Andrew Bowie was elected in 2017 as the Member of Parliament for West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine. And in fact, I think I'm right in saying, from my recollection of the date of the 2017 general election, that it was 17 months ago yesterday that he stood for election on June the 8th, 2017, and was returned for that constituency. He currently serves as a parliamentary private secretary at the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. Andrew has been with us throughout the day. He's made the commitment. We're delighted to have him, and we look forward to what he has to say. Andrew Bowie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, called last to speak again. It happens every single time. Good afternoon, MYPs, and what a huge pleasure to be here with you today for the 18th Youth Parliament and the 10th to be held here in this House of Commons. It's so great to see the House full of so many young people. It makes a change, I can assure you. I mean, I'm very glad Mr. Speaker and Valerie have remained in their places, because I'm not quite ready to be the father of the House just yet. I would be if you hadn't. And I'm not ashamed to say that I fervently hope that one day, in the not-too-distant future, I might be able to turn to my own benches, the government benches behind me, and see such a diverse and representative group of elected parliamentarians looking back at me. It's absolutely fantastic to see. And can I just say, before I go on, what a day today has been. What a privilege to sit in the undergallery at the back of the chamber and hear so many passionate, enthusiastic well-informed and, most importantly, in Mr. Speaker's eyes, concise speeches. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you would agree with me that I and my colleagues could take some lessons in that, and probably also in how to conduct ourselves in this chamber, but I'll move swiftly on. Speeches on so many issues that, as the Leader of the House said at first thing this morning, aren't just important to young people, but they're important issues to our whole country. Homelessness, equal pay for equal work, mental health, knife crime, and of course votes at 16. What today has demonstrated, and what you have all demonstrated beyond any doubt, is that a person's age has absolutely no bearing on their skill, their talent, their wisdom, or their ability to make a concise political argument. I'm here today in my role as the Parliamentary Private Secretary for the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. And one of the great things about working for DCMS, besides the free FA Cup tickets, is that it is the department responsible for youth policy and a youth voice, which means that the Minister for Sport and Civil Society, my boss, and I get to engage with and speak to young people the length and breadth of the country, like I'm so pleased to do today. The new Minister, Mims Davies, would genuinely have loved to have been here today, and I pass on her best wishes to you all. Unfortunately, she had prior engagements, as she only got appointed last Tuesday, so I'm afraid you got the poor substitute. I will, of course, pass on to her just how inspirational and informative today's sitting has been, and I know that she and I look forward to working with you all in the coming months and years. And so I would like to congratulate you all on your achievements today, for your work on Make Your Mark, which I was amazed to hear this morning got over 1 million votes. Look, I and every other MP knows just how nerve-wracking standing up and speaking in this place can be. Although I have to say, if any of you are as nervous as I was back in June 2017, you're hiding it incredibly well. But most of all, I've been struck by the variety of the debates and of the differing opinions on display. And what I think today has demonstrated beyond any doubt, and it is a point that I've been making time and time again since I got involved in politics after I left the Navy quite a few years ago now, is that young people are not some strange homogenous group who think the same, speak the same and look the same. Young people represent every idea, every view, every section of society at large. You lot just do it with a lot more enthusiasm than us cynical grown-ups. So many of you have shared moving stories on how the issues of knife crime and mental health have affected your peers and your communities. And so I want to thank you for being brave enough to come here to this place and speak up on what can be very emotionally difficult subjects. Secondly, I want you to know that we are listening to your concerns, that the government understand the importance of hearing directly from you. The Minister believes it is absolutely essential that the government engages meaningfully with young people and listens to your voices in policy making. Your work through the UK Youth Parliament is one way that we support Youth Voice, but we are delighted to be expanding our Youth Voice policy work over the coming months. In the Civil Society Strategy, which was published in the summer, we announced 3 new Youth Voice projects, which will involve young people directly in policy decision-making. We will be providing opportunities for young people like yourselves to get involved in developing youth policies through 2 new Youth Voice groups and a digital youth engagement project. These will enable young people to co-create and evaluate projects across government. And we want these groups to really this time, get involved in policy process to ensure that young people are able to have a say in the policies which affect them. In wider youth policy, we are committed to creating more social action opportunities for young people through the hashtag, and no, I didn't have to write out hashtag, I will campaign and fund, and the National Citizen Service, which I sincerely hope one day will be available across all the United Kingdom, including Scotland. DCMS, indeed the wider government, would love to see even more young people getting involved in their communities and making social action a habit for life. And of course, I have to end with some thank yous. So firstly, I'd like to thank you all for your hard work in this year's Make Your Mark ballot and in setting a new record. It is genuinely outstanding to have engaged over 1.1 million young people in the ballot. This really shows how Make Your Mark is a great example of democracy in action. Breaking the million mark would not have been possible without all of your efforts to promote the ballot in your local communities and amongst your peers. I would also like to thank Joe Hobbs and everyone at the British Youth Council. Your support for young people is truly valued, and we recognise your work to support Youth Voice at all levels around the UK. So could everybody in this chamber please join me in a humongous round of applause for everybody at the BYP. I, of course, have to thank the staff, the Sergeant-at-Arms, the police, and, Mr Speaker, I have to thank you. Without you and your commitment to the UK Youth Parliament, without your commitment to the young people of this country, and without your genuine commitment to making our democracy more accessible to all, this important day would be nothing like it is. For your steadfast support and commitment to it, and all of its members over the last 10 years, and in fact for your enduring commitment to this House and British democracy in general, I think all of us say thank you. MYPs, it really has been a huge honour to address you and listen to you this afternoon. But before I finish, I just want to go back to the very beginning of today, back to the words of Ali Raja, the MYP for London. It is so apt that this meeting takes place but 2 days before Remembrance Sunday. And we should never forget that the only reason that we are able to sit here today, the only reason we are able to debate, challenge each other, question how our country is run, the only reason democracy exists at all as we know it, is because young men, and more recently young women, so many of the same age as people in this chamber today, were willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice so that we might live in peace and freedom and defend democracy. And I can think of no better tribute to them on this special weekend than to have this House, the mother of all parliaments, packed to the rafters with passionate, enthusiastic voices for change, espousing the views of all kinds from a whole new generation. So I say, keep it up, keep going, never let up, and never let that passionate, burning flame, that desire to change this country and this world for the better, go out. Thank you very much.
Andrew, thank you very warmly indeed for that. You can see how well it went down with everybody here present, and it was hugely appreciated. I want now to call from London, Marcus Dyke. Marcus Dyke.
Members of Youth Parliament, it's been a long day, so I'm going to try and keep this short. Obviously, we've had many thank yous already from many members of Parliament. First of all, well done. Make Your Mark has finally reached over 1.1 million young people. It's phenomenal. The highest number of votes ever in Make Your Mark. Now, if that's not making history, I don't know what is. So that's what we've achieved in the last 100 years, and as we have today, we've looked past the last 100 years and the representation of the People's Act 1989. But for the most important part of this speech, I'd like to say thank yous. Thank you to all of those unsung heroes without whom we would not be here today. First of all, a huge heartfelt round of applause to the House of Commons staff, in particular Phil Howells, the principal doorkeeper, and to all at Parliament's Education and Engagement team. Now over to the British Youth Council, without whom we would not have a UK Youth Parliament. Thank you to the amazing team of dedicated and enthusiastic staff and volunteers who are 100% committed to championing and supporting the voices of young people across the UK. Today we've also been joined by some of the most inspirational politicians of the 21st century. Can we just give a rather special tribute to the Right Honourable Andrea Leadsom, MP, the Leader of the House of Commons, whose support throughout the years has been invaluable, not only to members of Youth Parliament but to all young people across the whole of the UK. Providing young people with such a bespoke opportunity is truly amazing, and I'm honoured to be working alongside people who make this happen. But of course, we cannot forget the House of Commons Library, the Shadow Leader of the House, Valerie Vaz MP, Wes Streeting MP, Parliamentary Private Secretary at the Department for Digital, Cultural, Media and Sport, Andrew Bowie MP, the former Minister for Civil Society, Tracy Crouch MP, who has been a fantastic advocate for Youth Voice, building it into the core of the civil society strategy. On behalf of the UK Youth Parliament, I would like to welcome the new Minister, Mims Davies MP, who we are looking forward to working with to ensure that young people's views are at the heart of all government decisions that affect the lives of young people. course, to all members of Parliament across the UK who have supported us throughout the year or who have joined us in the sitting today. That's almost everyone, but before I forget, there is one man who really is a true inspiration to all of us. The man who never fails to amuse and the man who is at the heart of UK democracy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for all that you do, not just for Parliament, but to Youth Parliament as well. Thank you for your ongoing support, both inside these four walls and indeed outside. Now, everyone, it's that time of year again, where we depart from the chamber, make our ways back to our constituencies and work tirelessly with our local politicians and local authorities to provide young people with the opportunity to make change. Whether your main focus is going to be knife crime, mental health or any other issue raised in the Make Your Mark consultation, from me, good luck. Members of Parliament, members of Youth Parliament, Mr. Speaker, British Youth Council, youth workers, the House of Commons. Thank you for your ongoing support in Make Your Mark and everything that the UK Youth Parliament does. And I hope you can all join me in a massive round of applause for every single person who has ever provided support to UK Youth Parliament. Thank you.
More than I can say. Bless you and good luck. Marcus, thank you for that. You thanked everybody in some style. And in a moment I'm going to announce the results of the votes. But just before I do, I just want to remind the British Youth Council support workers, parliamentary staff and guests of the need for the return of their votes for the Paul Bosquet Memorial Awards. Those votes must be returned, I believe, to British Youth Council staff. Please do so, because those awards are enormously important to their beneficiaries and as your testament to the legacy of a very remarkable man that Paul Bosquet was, somebody who championed you and who stood up for you, and it's our duty and privilege to remember him and preserve his legacy. I do now have the results of the votes, and the results are as follows. In respect, colleagues, of the reserved UK-wide issue, the votes cast were as follows. There were 4 spoilt ballot papers, but the votes were as follows. Let's Tackle Homelessness, 33 votes. Mental Health, 107 votes. Put an End to Knife Crime, 115 votes. So, Putting an End to Knife Crime is your UK-wide campaign for the year. Thank you for voting and for what you have said in the course of the debates. So far as the other choice is concerned, and that is the non-reserved matter, there were 2 options, and the votes on the yellow ballot paper were as follows. Equal pay for equal work, 110 votes. Votes at 16, 143 votes. Thank you. You've made your choice. Your challenge is to make a success of it. I hope you feel strengthened, buttressed, reinforced, energised by your efforts today and by the support you have received to redouble your efforts and to ensure that your campaigns prevail, that you achieve your objectives, that your policy priorities become those of the government, of Parliament and of the country as a whole. We are indeed drawing to a close. It has been for me the most enormous honour and privilege to chair these proceedings for the 10th successive year, and I've always said in going to your annual conference, I'll come every year, but I'll come every year not as a picket, and I do not want to be an unwelcome attendee or a kind of nuisance bystander. I will come to your annual sitting in due course, the summer of next year, if and only if you want me to do so. But from my point of view, it is a tonic, it's a fillip, and it's a feature of the annual political and parliamentary calendar to which I enormously look forward, as everybody who knows me and is around me, works with me, or is part of my family, is all too well aware.